Cochrane in Ottawa. The leaders' debates are over, and for many Canadians, they have seen and heard enough. Voters across the country lined up for the first day of advance polls, in some cases for hours, ready to make their choice for who should run the country. Was it the debates that made up their minds, or was their choice already locked in? Coming up, CBC News speaks to some of those Canadians about their rush to vote. And our party insiders are here to talk about the debate performances and whether they'll change this race. We're also going to talk about the substance of those debates and the sideshows around those debates. This election is entering the endgame. Power and Politics starts right now. The advance polls have opened across the country, making this the first day of large-scale voting in the race to be Prime Minister. And if long lineups are any indication, this election could be set for a big turnout. The CBC's Aaron Collins joins us now from Calgary. He is outside a polling station. So Aaron, long lines everywhere. How busy was it there today?
David, busy, really busy. We've been here off and on for most of the day, and I can tell you we were talking to people saying that 30, 40, 50, over an hour to get through this polling station. And when we talk to people as they make their way through, you get a few ideas about why that might be. But I tell you, we wanted to have a sort of a non-scientific idea of how long it did take. So we came to my polling station, and normally I can tell you, it's sort of walk right up to the table, you know, mark your candidate, and then get out of there. 5-10 minutes. Today, I had to leave because I had a hit coming up, right? So it was over an hour, and I think we are seeing that right across the country. We did converse with a few people as they were coming out to ask them what it was that brought them out. Have a listen to what they had to say.
Most times I've come out to early voting, it's been one or two people ahead of me, maybe. It could be a scheduling thing. People have the day off today. Yeah. Likely it's a holiday, so. And maybe voters are passionate this year. I'm not sure.
I thought I would be at rope drop. I was a little bit later, but it took a little longer, and I think it's a good sign. People are engaged.
It's about housing. It's about the economy. It is about our relations with our neighbor down in the south. It's about more than these elections have been in a long while, I think.
So probably all of the above, I would say, a little bit, getting people out. And of course, it is a holiday. Also here, we're in Calgary Confederation, which a lot of folks smarter than me are saying could be one of those real toss-ups here in Alberta.
Okay, it was touched on there a little bit in that clip, but what are you hearing about the issues that are driving people to vote early? It's more and more common every election.
100%. Obviously, we're here in Alberta, so you know some of those things are easy to track from election to election. The economy, resources, oil and gas, pipelines, those things are always important here, and people do bring up the economy, cost of living, that kind of stuff when you ask them why they're voting, what's important to them. But sort of bubbling underneath all of that, whether it's the economy or anything else, is the relationship with the United States, tariffs, sovereignty, and there is a sense that if voting, which it is a civic duty, this time it's more important than ever to get out and vote. So I think that's one of the things that's drawing people out. That, and it's a holiday, right? And it's a beautiful day. Why not head down to your polling station?
Okay, in your travels today and checking out the early voting, you ran into some young people, some students. I mean, what was the encounter there?
I did. We ran into people that were bringing their kids out for their first time voting, and of course, some people out there might have questions if it is their first time voting or they haven't voted in a while. You know, how do you do this? Where do you go? And there are these voting cards. Of course, you can also go to Elections Canada. But I have learned this today, David. If you have any further questions about how democracy in this wonderful country works, you go to the polling station. You will find an expert outside. Have a listen. What level of government is this?
Federal.
Federal. Very good. So who's in charge of the federal government?
The Prime Minister.
Are you allowed to vote?
No.
Why not?
Because you're a kid.
Should you be allowed to vote?
Yes.
Big issue for Quinn, more VR time, just so you know.
Right.
Not the economy. I think her economy is fine. And I have no doubt that she will be voting in about 10 years and likely be a very informed voter.
Yeah, and already ready to join one of the panels here on this show. Aaron Collins in Calgary, thanks so much,
100%.
man. Appreciate it. All right, that's the scene in Calgary, Alberta, but there are long lineups right across the country today, and our CBC teams have been speaking to Canadians about the choices they've made.
It's just this whole aspect of Canada being under threat, I think, and our economy being so threatened, and just general unease in the population, I think, is so much different than it has been in the past.
This is a vital election for Canada, and I'm just thrilled to see the turnout this early in the morning. And no matter the result, people are giving their opinions, so I'm very proud of us.
Everything's just such a mess all over the world that you don't want it to touch your community as badly, and I think it's really important just to vote so that we can have leaders that can speak for us.
Our country is in a state where people need to come together, and I think it's very important, and I also don't want to end up like the United States, so here we are.
Okay, that's a sample of what voters are saying about this election. Let's find out what our party insiders have to say with about, 10 days to go. All right, Melanie Richer, who we all know and love, she has bailed on us, joining the NDP campaign. So we've got former NDP strategist Jordan Likeness with us this week. And here in the studio, it's a local chapter, the CNFX Alumni Association. Greg McEachern is a former Liberal ministerial staffer. Fred Delory is a former Conservative campaign manager. Happy Friday, gang. Happy day after debate day. Let's start with our sense of just where this race is right now. Greg, how would you say things are at this moment?
To have the polls that have, we can look at some tightening perhaps this week, but to have the polls the way they've been for the last couple of weeks at the time of advanced voting, again, I'm not scientific here, anecdotal from my memory, but I don't remember a lot of close elections or elections that we thought were going to be close having this type of tightening at the time of the advanced polling. And, to your earlier clips from Calgary, I've heard the same thing from friends in Toronto and Ottawa. I had a friend here this morning who tried to vote early and decided, well, the lineup's too big, I'll come back. This is obviously because they just opened, went to the gym, and she texted me back, I wish I'd stayed in line because the line's even bigger. So there's something going on when, perhaps it's the holiday, but when you see a lot of interest in voting, that's usually a sign of, it used to be a sign of a change election, but I just think this time it's people are pretty engaged.
Fred, what's your thought? I mean, there has been a tightening of the top line polls, but the regional numbers where the Liberals need to be strong continue to be pretty strong. What's your sense of where the race is?
It's interesting where it is a change election where we do have a new prime minister no matter what comes out of this. I know Carney is in for a month or so, but this is a time where people get to pick what direction we're going in. I've been blown away with the advance polls and what I've seen myself personally, and as everyone else has indicated, I went to vote before I came here today and I couldn't. I would have missed the show.
Right.
I only vote in advance polls because I'm always doing something on election day as a partisan.
Ditto. Well, not as a partisan, but I'm usually busy on election day.
Right. So I always vote in election and in advance polls. You walk in, there's one or two people in front of you. It takes no time in and out. There was a lineup outside my polling station. I've never seen this before in advance polls.
If you want to go now, I could cover for you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate you.
I'm here to help.
A blue vote in the ballot box. But what's interesting is, though, in trying to figure out is where is the momentum. The Conservatives, at the same time, have never been more strong, right? Poilievre's numbers are where Stephen Harper was in 2011 when we got a majority government. But it's has the left coalesced under Carney at the same time? So there's two strong forces of momentum right now that are happening in front of us.
Okay, so Jordan, here we've got Fred putting his television career ahead of voting in this election, and Greg trying to do conservative.
2 more days of advance polls.
Greg trying to do conservative, get out the vote. What are your thoughts of where things stand right now?
Well, I mean, as a political nerd, we love to see it, right? This kind of engagement. This is the good stuff. I mean, in Canada, we've had a real problem with declining turnout over the years. So it's wonderful to see so many people tuning into this election, taking interest. And I also am blown away by the stories that we're hearing about the numbers that are turning out on advanced voting today. I think that's a really remarkable testament to what people feel the stakes are for this election. And, it was interesting. I was thinking back because in 2021, Statistics Canada did a little review after the election, and they asked people, if you didn't vote, why didn't you vote? And about a third of Canadians said it was because politics didn't interest them. And of course, as the saying goes, you may not be interested in politics, but politics is interested in you. And I think that people are really feeling that right now. They're feeling the impacts of the decisions on their day-to-day lives, everything from their jobs, their employment, the threats from the United States, but also the cost of housing, people struggling to put food on the table. Those things are very real. And so whatever the reason that's bringing people out, I think it's a good sign for our democracy to see so many people out. And that's something that we can all, I think, across the spectrum be pretty engaged about.
So Greg, on that, I mean, when we were younger men, because we're not old yet, when you'd see a big turnout in the early voting, it was a sign of, people are really motivated and they want change. If you were an incumbent, like your party is right now. But increasingly, it's just parties put more effort in getting their strongly identified votes in, and people just like the convenience of early voting, right? Like for reasons like Fred identified. So I guess we need to be a bit careful, maybe, when we get the turnout numbers on Monday. I mean, how should we assess this?
Well, and I would apply that to polling as well. I think there's a lot of Liberals that are very happy to see the polling, but also realize that polling didn't go their way for a long time, and it moved very quickly. And so people naturally have, other than a recent example, maybe that I won't really go into, but most Liberals want to work as hard as they can, because what if this rapid polling and the change in technology, the way we consume news, what if, if we can't perhaps use the standard that we used in the 2006 election to apply this year? So yeah, and like Jordan, as a fellow geek, I'm really happy to see people show up and go to the polls. But my first election, was 1988, and I remember, especially in Atlantic Canada, a lot of people. There was the free trade election, and a lot of the seats that Mulroney picked up in his sweep of '84, they lost in '88. That was there was a very policy-heavy free trade election. It was expected to be about things like acid rain the year before and the environment. It ended up, being turned on that, and there was a heavy turnout, especially in Atlantic Canada. I think maybe even close to 80% at that time. So again, not a change election, but a motivating election, I think, for a lot of voters.
Yeah, I mean, that's the election, it seems, Fred, is probably the most like this one in terms of the issues. You have that, famous debate clip between Turner and Mulroney, where you lose the economic levers of the country, the country soon follows. It has been, to some degree, those kinds of stakes. So, as the guy who ran the 2021 election campaign for the Conservatives, what do you look for in advance polling for signs of direction, momentum, and hope?
Well, it's about how much of your ID'd voters are coming out. That's at the core of the campaign. You've ID'd people for the last, number of years, but then really focused on the last month. How many of them are coming out? And you have it broken down by target seat, the percentage that are voting. And generally in the last election, 34% of Canadians voted in the advanced poll. So 1/3 voted then. Total electoral turnout was 62%. Will we break that, and do we have the numbers? I can say, the conversations I've had with campaign managers across the country for the Conservative Party in local ridings is voter ID is up higher than it's ever been. Enthusiasm is up higher. I've heard of ridings running out of signs halfway through this campaign that usually they have a hard time putting signs up. So there's something there, but again, is it there for both parties? There's this enthusiasm for both parties, and that's where things are really up in the air because of that.
Right. So Jordan, on that, and we're going to have, as we move through this hour, we're going to talk about the debates, we're going to talk about the endgame and the state of things. The New Democrats have been making a pitch for kind of relevance and survival and a meaningful presence in the House of Commons in a very polarized election. So what does Team Orange look for in the data for the next couple of days that could give them some hope, and where are they looking for? What parts of the country?
So like the Conservatives, they're going to be looking to see if their marks are turning out in the advanced vote. So they get that information pretty quickly from Elections Canada about who's been voting. And so they can look to see if it's their folks that are turning out. And that will give them a sense of how well their get out the vote operation is working. And I will say that traditionally New Democrats have a pretty good machine for advanced voting, get out the vote. So that's something that traditionally would tend to work in their favor. You know, they're also looking at metrics like, for example, local fundraising, which despite the national numbers has actually been going pretty well for the New Democrats this campaign. They're seeing donations come in quite well in a number of regions of the country. But a lot of their focus over the next period of time is going to be very squarely in British Columbia and in Ontario, particularly in Southwest Ontario and in Northern Ontario, where they hold incumbent seats.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, the panel gives their high-level takeaways from that high-stakes English debate. Don't go away.
Liberal government has weakened our economy with anti-energy laws.
Mr. Carney, you are becoming a real Canadian leader, saying one thing in French and another one in English.
While these two compete about who's more pro-pipeline, I think what we need to do is, I mean, it's clear. The Liberals bought a pipeline, they built a pipeline. I don't know what Pierre is complaining about.
You can't do something and the opposite, and you can't fill people's mind with nonsense.
Mr. Poilievre, you spent years running against Justin Trudeau on the carbon tax, and they're both gone. Okay, they're both gone, and we're
doing
in
a
a
good
new
impersonation of them with the same policies tonight.
Very different.
Justin Trudeau's staffers are actually here with you at this debate in Montreal, writing the talking points that you are regurgitating into the microphone. How can we possibly believe that you are any different than the previous 10 years of Liberal government.
25 seconds left in this segment for you to respond to that.
Look, I do my own talking points. Thank you very much.
Will you look the camera in the eye and apologize to the many people who suffered as a result of the inflationary policies that you advised Justin Trudeau to implement?
You know, I said earlier, but I'm going to say it again. I know you want to be running against Justin Trudeau. Justin Trudeau isn't here.
Okay, those are just some of the highlights from last night's leaders' debate, the final face-to-face confrontation of this campaign. So did it change the direction of the race, or did it come too late to make a significant difference? We're going to bring back our panel of party insiders, Jordan Leiknitz, Greg McEachern, and Fred Delory. Jordan, let's start with you. What's your initial high-level takeaway of that debate? I mean, it's the last big set piece of the campaign. Did it matter? Too early to know? What do you think?
I think it mattered in that it is likely going to confirm the direction that the campaign is already going. I think that every leader, maybe with the exception of the Bloc, got a little bit of something that they needed out of the debate last night. So I think that Carney had a relatively solid night. He was able to withstand the attacks. He brought, the sense of gravitas, leadership, however you want to put it, that people find appealing. He brought that to the stage, even if he did get a little lost in the policy at some points. And Pierre Poilievre had a conundrum, right? So he brought the version of himself to the stage that is his prime ministerial person. So that is less personal attacks, that is less fire, a little calmer. And I think that within those constraints, he did well. But the challenge is when you strip away sort of the fire and the populism that really has animated his rise, do voters find him appealing? And, I think he had a good moment. We'll talk about that later. But I'm not, he's a bit in a catch-22. And as for Singh, his brief was pretty straightforward. He needed to fight his way in. He needed to show the relevance of the NDP and why it matters to have a New Democrat presence on our federal political scene. And I think he was able to effectively do that. He brought some of the same energy that we saw from the French debate. He brought that to the English debate, and I think it served him well last night.
Fred, what are your thoughts? Your big takeaway after watching that last night?
Yeah, I think the two front runners, I think, did very well in doing what they needed to do in many regards. I thought Poilievre looked statesman-like in many ways, where he was more reserved and not the attack dog leader of the opposition that he's been over the last number of years.
You saw glimpses of it a little bit earlier in the debate, but it subsided.
Look,
he
is who he is, but at the end of the day, I thought he looked pretty calm. And
he had a good night, I thought.
And he kept coming back to his ballot question a lot in many regards, and the way he went at Carney when the question was asked. When each leader got to ask a question, I thought he did a very good job of putting it right to Carney about inflation. I thought Carney looked incredibly smart as well. Like he was, going into the policy depth he went into. I think that's what Canadians kind of want to see right now in this election, like someone who has the depth and the ability to do this. But I think there was a strategic mistake for Carney to ask about, when he had the question that he could ask any leader, he asked about security clearance. What is your ballot question? It's Trump. It's the 51st state. He didn't go into any of this stuff, and I don't know what the question he could have put to Poilievre, but it could have been something. His campaign's been trying to draw comparisons. I don't know why he didn't.
I would have asked him why no Conservative MP went on U.S. cable to defend Canada against Trump, like everybody else did.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Well, very few opposition members did. I know
the Democrats, but a lot of people did. I think that could have been a more effective.
There's lots of questions he could have asked that could have tried to tie to his ballot question. Instead, he went off on this side thing and I thought Poilievre knocked it out of the park the way he responded to it, and pushed it right back. And Carney looked a bit lost on it.
Yeah, and he hinted at the Indian stuff at the end, but never got to it. Carney didn't. Right? Like he never got in there.
And then there was Jagmeet Singh, who was an attack dog throughout the whole campaign. I don't know if he's working on the Carney campaign or what it was, but he was very, I think there was a time when Carney actually had to ask him to stop going after Poilievre the whole time.
Yeah, I actually, before I go to you, Greg, Jordan, can I just come back to you on that? Like, people were wondering about that. Obviously, Jagmeet Singh does not like Pierre Poilievre's style, policies, and goals, but he was, over the course of both debates, a little bit more focused on him than you'd think he would be when you're losing votes to Carney. Is it the idea that they want to make the Liberals look inevitable to get people back? Like, why focus more on Poilievre than on Mark Carney in a moment like that?
Well, I think if you look at the number of interventions, he didn't focus more on Poilievre on either night. But for sure, any New Democrat leader has to take the fight to the Conservatives, because a big part of what New Democrat voters are looking for is somebody to do that, somebody to stop the Conservatives, to stand up to them, and particularly a Conservative that many progressives view as scary, as a lot of people think of Pierre Poilievre. So he has to do both. He has to take the fight to Poilievre to show that he's capable of delivering that. But then he also has to poke holes in Carney's case that he's making to progressive voters and point out some of the particular areas in Carney's approach and policy that might not be so appealing to progressives if they take a look below the surface. And so you saw him making that case in particular on things like housing, on healthcare, on cuts to the budget. Those are things that he was really looking to put on the table in the debate on both nights.
Okay, I gotcha. All right, so Greg, high-level takeaway from what you saw.
Yeah, what I'm not talking about, I'm very happy about, which we might have thought last week we'd be talking about Mark Carney's French this week.
His English was very good last night.
His English was good, and I'm, it is my mother tongue, so I'm kind of an expert, even have a degree. So all of the expectations were going to be very negative around the French debate. I think between Tout le Monde and the French debate, that's been kind of settled and moved on, and we're not talking about it. In terms of the debate itself, there was a moment where someone texted me and said, why isn't a Liberal said, why isn't Mark Carney saying more? And he was literally stuck in the middle, and I won't use the lines that also go on in that song lyric about the on your right and left, but there was a moment where literally Singh and Poilievre were arguing over him, and I said that's exactly where he wants to be, because if you're trying to say that you're the adult in the room and you're the best person to face Trump, and these are your two opponents and this is what they're doing, do not get in their way and let them do that. Poilievre is in a tough spot on this because he's kind of damned, either way. If he's the attack dog that he's really good at, but he's not building. But if he's prime ministerial, he is less effective. He seems more muted. And the other thing on Singh, there's a great joke the Beaverton had today, the satirical website, that they said they want to write a debate analysis, but Jagmeet Singh kept interrupting them.
There was a lot of that.
But I think, what he did in the French debate and the English debate, Mr. Singh, is what he needed to do. And he actually, showed that he wants this and that he's in, and I think that's what he needed to do. But I think, the debate itself, no harm, no foul.
Yeah, and Fred, that was a Steelers wheels reference. He was referencing clowns to the left and jokers to the right. You were looking at him a bit off. Anyway,
I'll tell you about.
No, I'm trying to bring you along. Make sure
way younger than you guys. So
yeah, I know. Greg was too subtle for his own good there. Look, I want to bring in one of the moments that we talked about. Pierre Poilievre had a couple of good moments near the end of the debate, in particular. Got emotional, very human about things. Just have a listen to this. We'll talk about it on the other side.
I had a rule that at all my rallies, even when they're really big, I would stand in front of a flag and greet every single person and hear their stories and learn their struggles. And that was always touching to me, that they would put their faith in me or in any of us.
Yeah.
But we've been in such a rush because we have to get off to the next event, so we haven't been able to stop and do that. And I want you to know out there, I haven't forgot about you.
Fred, what do you make of that? We don't usually see Pierre Poilievre speaking in such a way and getting that kind of emotional. What do you think?
I'd love to see more of that. I think he'd be in a better place right now if we saw more of that over the last few years. But at the end of the day, it's at the core of his message at the same time too, right? He's fighting for the little guy, and it drives back to his ballot question of what he's going to do. So I thought that was great, and it is a lot of people voting today, tomorrow, and Monday, and then the Monday after. I don't know if there's time enough to do this, but I think that's the type of message he needs to hammer home.
Jordan, that's what I was wondering about, is that, you've talked about this a lot on your podcast, Curse of Politics, that you do, that he has got a problem with women voters, and this is the kind of thing that, is less scary to women voters, to use the word you like to describe it, but it came late in the debate, and it comes late in the campaign, and really late in the career, do you think this sort of a move is enough?
I mean, I think by far and away, I found that to be his strongest moment of the night. And for me, it was similar to where we saw him in the podcast earlier this week talking about his daughter. And I think that is the type of thing, that's the sort of the human touch, understanding what motivates him as a politician, any leader really, is I think important for voters. And so that's something that is also very difficult to carry off, I think, for a leader of that type of personality. You have to remember that Pierre Poilievre, his entire adult life, has been a partisan politician and a attack dog. It's really difficult to change that persona, particularly when it had been working so well for him for 2 years. So I think those moments were very strong. But I think really for the Conservative campaign to make good use of them, they would need a time machine, because they have spent the last 2 years introducing him to Canadians as that partisan attack dog, as somebody who enjoys the fight, who likes talking about the U-Haul rolling up to CBC, all of those types of things. And so it's going to be very difficult for any sort of personality transplant to register with voters over just 10 days remaining in the campaign. But I think that, as the Conservatives, after the campaign, when they look back, I think that there will be maybe some lamenting that this aspect of his political persona wasn't really developed more over the last couple of years, because it's a good one.
Yeah, I mean, Greg, it was an interesting moment to see, but less than 12 hours after that moment, like, people were voting in Atlantic Canada, the advanced polls. You know what I mean? And with the polls suggesting a lot of people are already locked in, can anything happen last night?
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, I'm not his biggest fan, and that
it didn't win you over. No,
no, the moment did not, until when he turns to his colleagues on the stage and he acknowledges that they are all in this together.
Yeah, I thought that was a good moment.
That was a different side of that gentleman I haven't seen in a long time. I was at a debate watching event, a small event with Jordan last night. It was a mix of multi-partisan, non-partisan. And the moment when he kind of served it up to Carney when he said, about the carbon tax and Justin Trudeau's not here, in that room, that hit. Like, that was a big, gasp, roar sort of thing. Because the other edgy part of it is Carney was, also like, moving away from Trudeau at the same time. To Jordan's point, though, about selling him, I checked before I came here. Kate McKenna did a report in August of 2023. The Conservatives spent $3 million for a nice get-to-know-you ad. There was the puzzle and everything. $3 million. That's a lot of money. And they did those ads, and then they dropped them. We never heard from them.
Well, and you never saw any of that sort of on the social media, which is how we communicate. And so like you didn't get the virtuous circle, the amplification of things. But look, just because you mentioned it, I want to get to that moment. This is the Mark Carney moment where, Pierre Poilievre is trying to say this is the fourth term of the Justin Trudeau Liberal government, and this was the rebuttal from the Liberal leader.
Mark Carney is asking for a fourth Liberal term, repeating the exact same Liberal promises that priced you out of a house.
You spent years running against Justin Trudeau and the carbon tax, and they're both gone. Okay, they're both gone. And we're in a new
impersonation of them with the same policies tonight.
Very different. Look, I'm a very different person from Justin Trudeau.
Okay, Greg, he's talked more about the economy in the last month than Justin Trudeau did for a period of time. But that moment in particular, I mean, why did you find that so effective in the debate?
It does feel edgy. As a Liberal, there's going to be this tension around, if the Liberals win under Carney, they're going to have to reckon with some good decisions the Trudeau government made and some bad ones, and how is this going to look? And again, anybody who's in politics, you want to win. And how do we, I really like Justin Trudeau, but I thought it was time for him to step down. I'm not alone in that. And having it said that way, I think was probably very effective for anybody that was having some doubts about, they're about to vote Liberal. Well, this guy has made it very clear that there's a break there.
Fred, does that do it? Because, it is a lot of the same people and, but it is a change in focus and in tone and in style with the change in leader.
Mark Carney's not running as a Liberal. He's running as a progressive Conservative. That's what his brand is, they're trying to establish. I go back to the carbon tax where, there was something that Poilievre really, really hammered and turned so many people against it by his campaign against it. He did a great job on that, but then when Carney signed it off on his first day as Prime Minister, Conservatives should have done a victory lap on that. We should have been out saying, we did this, we got this done. Instead, we got in this convoluted argument that it's not actually gone. And we gave him ground on that instead of, and now, we called him carbon tax Carney, and we had these ads running that I don't think were very effective for our cause. I think they helped the Liberals. It turned people off from us. So the messaging, it needs to work for us if we're going to tie it to Trudeau, and we just haven't done that in an effective way.
Yeah, Jordan, I mean, he's obviously a very different type of prime minister than Justin Trudeau was. What I find interesting about Mark Carney is he doesn't litigate things the way the Trudeau-era Liberals did. Like when he's confronted with a question on immigration, he goes, oh yeah, we made a mess of that. And he doesn't argue that they didn't, and he just says, yeah, here's how we're going to fix it. I don't know if that's effective or what. I mean, what do you make of that moment and just whether he is enough change rhetorically in these things?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think voters have decided he's enough change. And that's one of the fascinating dynamics of this election because it as Fred was saying earlier, it is still a change election. We are still really in that mindset among the voting public. But the magic, the mystique that Carney has brought to the race is that he's been able to persuade a substantial number of voters looking for change that he is that change, not the Conservatives. And so I think that's defying gravity in a lot of ways. That's a very unusual political circumstance, something that he's been able to pull off there. But, it is true. He is quite different from Trudeau. And I think that for progressive voters, this is where there is still space for the NDP to try to get in there and point out that he is not a Trudeau Liberal. This is not the left-leaning Liberal Party that we've had for the last decade. This is a very right-leaning Prime Minister who has some specific agenda items that would maybe not be so appealing to progressives if they were to look a little bit below the surface. And so I think that in a certain way, you're going to see the NDP almost making the opposite argument that the Conservatives are making about how much change Mr. Carney represents.
Okay, well, let's talk a bit about that because Jagmeet Singh, he's been trying to punch through on healthcare, but also trying to punch through on the value of the New Democrats and their role in Parliament. Just have a listen to this moment from the debate last night.
We are going to build this country in a way that has not been seen before. We are literally talking about hundreds of thousands, not jobs, but careers in the trade. And that's why we're investing in apprenticeships and mid-career.
But I think people are worried, Mr. Carney, if New Democrats aren't there to force Liberals to make sure they remember about people they will forget.
Okay, Jordan, why is that moment so effective? I mean, he's been trying to be the workers' champion in the tariff issue and stuff. Well, why did you like that from Jagmeet Singh?
At the core of the message the New Democrats need in order to survive through this campaign and to retain their seats and maybe even grow, who knows, at this point, is that they have to make the case that there's value in having New Democrats in Parliament and in not handing the Liberals a blank check with a majority government. So, we talked a little bit about the polls earlier, and while it's true that there's been a little bit of movement here and there, really the way those votes are piling up in places like the prairies for the Conservatives, it means that we are still looking at an extraordinarily high likelihood of a Liberal majority government. So the question is, in that scenario, who are you going to have in opposition? Are you going to have only Conservatives in opposition who are cheering for deeper cuts, or are you going to have New Democrats there who are fighting for some of the social programs and things that people rely on? So that's the case that Mr. Singh was making last night, and he was using things that the NDP had accomplished in the Confidence and Supply Agreement as a proof point to say that when you get even a small New Democrat presence in Parliament, because of course, remember, they were the fourth party in the last Parliament, and they were able to get through this historic expansion of Medicare. And so that's the value they bring to the table. And so he was really making that case, I think, clearly last night. Now, the question is, can that be heard by voters in time? Are they going to feel secure enough in the inevitability of a Liberal majority that they can cast their vote for New Democrats? And are the New Democrats going to be able to get out and make the argument in key seats that they are actually the strategic vote to defeat the Conservatives?
So, Fred, you just worked on the Ontario campaign, right, with Doug Ford. I mean, Marit Stiles kind of made an effective argument to vote NDP in the places where the NDP existed, because they came third in vote but second in seats. I mean, is this what Jagmeet Singh is doing here? Is this a similar sort of argument? Do you think that punches through here?
I don't know if he's doing it effectively. I think that's what he should be doing and what he needs to hammer on. I think that's the best bet. But, you know, if you look at the Ontario election, it was a very different circumstance where there was no real change election. Ford was going to win. I think we all accepted Ford was going to win. The left and the right and the center all knew he was going to win. So the NDP held their, you know, their seats. They dropped dramatically in their vote share over the last 2 elections, but they only lost, I think, 1 seat from what they had before, which is remarkable. That's quite unheard of. But it was almost like, well, look, if we're not happy with Ford, we can still just. There's no change. The Liberals didn't catch fire then in Bonnie Crombie's campaign, so there was no real need to move. I think that's very different in this election where people are choosing who is going to be Prime Minister. And that's the major struggle Singh has in this. And his message just has not resonated at that level. There's no, I think I think the NDP are heading for a complete wipeout where they will not have official party status after this.
We saw, Greg, too, like I know I want you to focus on Singh, but Yves-François Blanchet looked a bit lost in these debates in a way I have never seen him look.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He's normally very sure and steady and confident and straight ahead, and he just did not have that, you know, certainly in the English debate, like, which is, you know, normally the footloose and fancy-free candidate on that stage.
Yeah.
But Mr. Singh's pitch there, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, you know, it might be too little too late, but it's probably the thing that has worked the best for him thus far. You know, we were chatting last week about, you know, Vancouver Island usually being blue-orange switches, and as Fred, when we chatted afterwards, said, you know, check some of the polling there, you know, there is Liberals in play there.
They think they're in play there.
Yeah, so, you know, obviously that's a concern, especially if you hold a seat in as Mr. Singh does, in British Columbia. I noted that there's been an ad change, you know, for the New Democrats, and you know, I would love to see somebody who is better at recent advertising analysis than I am. But they're very good ads. They look great. But that first one where he was saying that Mr. Carney has spent his entire life, you know, hurting workers. You know, that is something that sticks out like a sore thumb, because, you know, if you look at his actual, you know, resume, not all of his time has been in the private sector. He worked in government, and it also sounded something that should be coming from Mr. Poilievre, not Mr. Singh, somebody who had a lot of accomplishments through the supply and confidence agreement. Perhaps it tested well, but I don't see it anymore. I don't know if it's still on, but it didn't. I thought it sounded odd.
Gotcha. Fred, quick thought?
Just the Bloc and Blanchet, I thought was fascinating, having observed these folks and dealt with them for many years. He was basically talking about working as a partnership in a future parliament that I've never seen them actually talk about.
From the Sovereigntist Party.
The party that wants to destroy Canada wants to save Canada or something. I don't quite understand it. But usually that's case by case to look at each budget or each bill. But last night throughout the debate, it felt like he was basically saying, like, I want to be at the table too, which is something I've never actually seen from the Bloc.
Yeah, you know, Mr. Duceppe and Mr. Blanchet have always felt in the English debate like they're playing with house money. Yeah. And it didn't quite seem that way. I mean, who knows? The Quebec numbers are not good for them or the Conservatives right now. Okay, that's the substance of the debate. Up next, we're going to discuss the side shows, plural, of the debates. Well, after the debate, the parties wasted no time getting back on the campaign trail today. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre began the day in Montreal. He visited a recycling plant where he announced he would end the ban on some single-use plastics. Poilievre then headed to Toronto, where he stopped at a Hindu temple.
How long does this bread stay fresh and edible if it's not packaged? You ever think of taking your bread out when you go home and just leaving it unwrapped? How many days do you think it would be good before it gets dried out and moldy? How long would the other fresh produce here stay edible if it could not be plastic wrapped? The answer is a lot less time.
In addition to repealing the ban on items like plastic straws and grocery bags, Poilievre says he would stop efforts to ban other plastic items like bread bags and produce bags. The CBC's Catherine Tunney has more. Kat.
David, as this election campaign enters the home stretch, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre has a message for Canadians. He'll bring plastic bags and straws back. Speaking from a recycling plant in Montreal, Poilievre promised to end the federal ban on single-use plastics, a policy that is currently tied up in the courts. Poilievre's announcement comes on the heels of last night's debate, where tensions became so heated due to the presence of the right-wing media outlet Rebel News, the traditional post-debate scrum was cancelled. Poilievre was asked whether the debate commission should be abolished. The Conservative leader was also asked whether he'd still fire the Bank of Canada governor, a promise that had been a staple of his speeches. Poilievre didn't respond to those questions. When journalists shouted for him to clarify his position, his staff moved in to surround reporters and drown them out with clapping. On a final note, as you know, the Conservatives choose who gets the questions. CBC has not been allowed to ask a question all week. David?
Okay, Kat, thank you very much. That's the CBC's Catherine Tunney in Montreal. Okay, so you saw their footage of reporters trying to ask the Conservative leader some questions today. He takes 4 with no follow-ups. Why don't I just give you a bit more of that? Play that tape and some sound. So just take a listen to that moment. Now, reporters did get a chance to ask the Liberal and NDP leaders about the post-debate scrums being cancelled last night and the events that caused all of that.
It was unfortunate that, I'll just state the obvious, it is absolutely right and necessary and appropriate. It's not to, after the debate, to take your questions, and that couldn't happen last night. That was, I regret that, and well, this is a substitute for it. It's not a full substitute.
These are groups that purposely spread disinformation. We have heard for multiple reasons this is dangerous to our democracy, dangerous to our society. The public inquiry into the foreign interference and the commission, Justice Hogue said really clearly, misinformation is dangerous. It threatens our democracy.
Okay, that's the next topic for the party insiders. Jordan Leichnitz, Greg McEachern, and Fred Delory. Jordan, I've never seen a debate kind of go sideways like things did last night. The debate itself, full marks, good stuff. You know, the 2 hours in the French debate and the English debate, beforehand and after. You know, where do you want to start on the sort of the side shows?
It was a complete debacle, and I think it really did a disservice in a couple ways. And first and foremost, because it has, frankly, overshadowed a lot of the content of the debates. And that is a disservice to voters who maybe not have a lot of time to contemplate the issues around the campaign. And instead of being able to read a lot of coverage about what's happening in the debate, they're reading about Rebel News. And I think, you know, look, these people are not journalists. These are advocacy groups. These are far-right organizations that are interested in disrupting these events. They're not covering them. They're not media. And it was an incredible mistake to allow them into the event in the first place, and then a double mistake to allow them to obtain so many media credentials that they were able to ask almost a majority of the questions to the leaders after the French debate. This is a disservice, I think, to everybody. And people are rightly incredibly angry at the debate commission for how this was handled. And there have been no suitable or adequate explanations so far about how this was allowed to happen.
Fred, what are your thoughts on the way everything went down?
Yeah, I think it was a train wreck in many regards, and the debates were pretty good. The way the process or the setup, the way it worked with the one host in French, one host in English. You didn't have a bunch of different hosts coming in from other outlets. So we've done the last few debate commissions.
They've tried to make it a
mess.
TV show in the past when it needs to be a debate between people who want to run the country.
Right. It reminds me more of the conservative leadership debate when we had Tom Clark hosting and we had paddles and horns going off.
You don't need sticks,
circus, right? So I thought that was good. The sideshow at the end was a complete mess. And I think it was on the debate commission on how they handled this. And I think the problem is we have a debate commission. I don't know why we have this. I don't think we should have this. This is the third election in a row we've had the debate commission, and it's the third election in a row we're talking about the debate commission on the day after the election. I think there's a way to fix this where the parties should just get together like they used to do for all of Canada's history and figure out how you want to do the debates, bringing in a consortium to run it if you want, and put in a proper process where, the Rebel and those folks, they're gonzo journalists. They want to get in there and they want to cover you. They don't want to cover necessarily the news. They want to make you a part of the story and how everything's covered. And that's just not, I don't think, the appropriate place for that.
Yeah, Greg, what do you think of what we saw?
Well, I think they're gonzo. I don't think they're journalists. And, I'm going to sort of quote Bob Fife here, and he points out, and you can draw the line. These groups are connected with a lot of the elements of the Conservative Party. And historically, this goes back in terms of one individual to, Stockwell Day and the origins of part of the Conservative Party. And as Bob Fife said, you can tell when they ask questions and they're, it's the Simpsons episode, Mr. Burns, your campaign has the momentum of a runaway freight train. Why are you so popular? Oh, that's tough but fair. So when you see those questions served up, we know. But the other thing I think that they try to take advantage of is that real journalists do not want to insert themselves in the story and make themselves the story. And, it's really tough. I wasn't there. Jordan wasn't there. Fred, you were there, and we hear things. We've seen some things posted. It sounds pretty horrific.
Yeah, look, it was very difficult. I'm not, it was very chaotic. And you probably saw, so we were in the second hour of our show last night and we were playing a montage of great debate moments of the past. We just had the panel for the first hour, which you're all very familiar with. We used a bit of tape to get them unhooked and out, and we were going to bring Rosie in. And as the tape was playing, Ezra Levant came over, and he was rolling on it. His people were filming it, and he started trying to talk to me and Rosie. I was like, Ezra, we're live, we're doing a show, and he kept trying to say he wanted to come on the show because he wanted to respond to things that I had raised with Michel Cormier in the interview I did off the top of the show about how did this happen, right? The third-party advertising registrations and those sorts of things. And he kept going and going, and the tape was about to run out, and very smartly, the control room saw what was happening, and instead of coming back to us live after the debate montage ended, they played those reporter rants that we call it a rant, like what Kat Tundy just did. They played the next two of those, and it was still going, and it was still going as we're waiting for security to come and deal with it. And then they finally went to an interview that luckily we had taped with Steve Paikin earlier in the day. And we were able to get things under control and moved on then. Otherwise, we would have had to go to commercial or stop broadcasting, or a possible confrontation between me and Levant would have been aired on television. He said a bunch of stuff to us that I'm not going to repeat, and they recorded it, so they have a record of it. But we went to the debate commission and said this needs to be taken care of. And an official in the debate commission said, no, he promised he won't do it again. And because you were in commercial, they didn't interrupt the broadcast, so they didn't take action. And so all this sort of stuff happened. And, in Jordan, it was, you don't want to be in the middle of that, but you get forced into the middle of it. And then while we were doing that, like Jordan, you've probably all seen the clips, there was shouting matches and arguments and stuff happening in the media center. And everything just went utterly sideways.
I mean, it's appalling. That's the only word for it. Journalists, real media, were there, like you and others were there. You guys were there to do your jobs, and that means covering what's happening. And Ezra Levant and the Rebel crew and all of those folks, by all accounts, were there to try to disrupt that work. And that's just not how things should be working in a democracy. I think it's really alarming. I think any attempt to normalize it is wrong. And I think that the fact that the debate commission didn't step in to prevent this, knowing full well the folks and the characters involved, is just an incredible lapse of leadership. And they really haven't answered for that adequately.
Yeah, you know, Fred, I did an interview with Mr. Cormier yesterday, and to his credit, he came out and did it, which I always do respect, and he's a former Radio Canada journalist and former correspondent in his career. But we showed him the paper of the third-party registration. They didn't seem to know anything about it. You know what I mean? Right. Like, they have a staff, they have a legal team. They were forced to accredit them because of a court decision. But it's then how you manage it afterwards. They didn't seem prepared for and didn't seem to know about these other actions. Because it seems to me if someone's registering as a third-party actor and setting up a separate company to also do that, that maybe is a bit of evidence you can bring into a legal fight in terms of whether someone's a journalist or not.
Right. The fact that they didn't know that is problematic. It shows that, that's the problem with these debate commissions. We form them quickly right during an election. We're throwing these people together and expecting them to run these complicated processes, which clearly it's been a failure since the start. We need to get rid of them, and we should just let the parties figure it out going into future elections on how to do this.
Yeah, Greg, I don't know if it's the structure or just how the structure is functioning, but I would hope, if this isn't my last election, and yesterday I felt like I might not make it to the end of this election, that there's a cleaner process for it next time.
Yeah, it's kind of a shame because by most accounts, the French, the English debate, the debates itself went well. It's the things around
just sorry to interrupt you, those were CBC Radio Canada pitched and produced debates. We had to make a pitch to the consortium to be picked to do it, and that's what we presented as a company, and were chosen to do it. So the format and all of that was your national public broadcaster in both official languages that delivered that.
Well, thank you for that, because I credit where credit is due. The other thing is there are plenty of people around communications, politics, that could serve on that advisory committee, on that board, who know how to run election night, know how to run a debate. It should not have sometimes the Trudeau government, when they pick people for things, it was like they were casting based on who they were and what they were. Get people who can actually do the job and have done the job.
Yeah. Okay, one last little segment to get to. We're going to talk about the endgame of this campaign and then let you go enjoy your Easter weekend. Because after spending much of the week in Montreal, the Liberal campaign has headed back to Ontario. Leader Mark Carney stopped in Niagara Falls this morning, where he made a speech focused on his plan to stand up to Donald Trump. He then went to Port Colborne to visit a small business and then ended his day with a meet and greet in Brantford.
We need a plan to deal with this new reality. Because, and I know this from experience, that in a crisis, plan beats no plan. A plan provides direction in the fog of uncertainty. A plan provides purpose. It rallies the team. It drives action.
Carney says he will unveil the Liberals' fully costed election platform tomorrow. The CBC's Karina Roman has more. Karina.
David, here in Niagara Falls, Ontario, across from Niagara Falls, New York, Liberal leader Mark Carney doubled down on the central pitch of his campaign. Carney says he has managed crises almost all of his professional life. He says he is the best person to lead Canada during this crisis, that the now fractured U.S.-Canada relationship due to Trump's tariffs and sovereignty threats will be felt more keenly here and in other border towns than anywhere else in Canada. At last night's debate, Carney said that China was the greatest security threat to Canada. Today, he was asked if Canada can afford a trade war with both its biggest trading partners. He responded by saying there is tremendous opportunity for trade with countries in Europe and Southeast Asia, whose values have not shifted away from Canada's. Carney says the relationship between this country and the U.S. will eventually be better than it is now, but it also will never be the same as it was. Tomorrow, Carney is expected to unveil the costed Liberal platform, in which voters will be able to see the total cost of all Carney's promises and how he plans to pay for them. David?
Thank you, Karina. That was the CBC's Karina Roman in Niagara Falls, Ontario. Well, now to check in with the New Democrats. Leader Jagmeet Singh began his day west of Montreal. He unveiled his party's commitments to Quebec and visited a farm with the local candidate. It was then wheels up for British Columbia. Singh will cast his ballot in his Burnaby riding with his family later tonight.
For us, when we lay out our vision for Quebec, it's one of acknowledging Quebec as a nation. We are proud to be allies in supporting that.
Singh said he would support Quebec's agriculture industry, protect its biodiversity, and push for an east-west power grid to give Hydro-Quebec better access to the Canadian market. The CBC's Marina von Stackelberg is traveling with the NDP. Marina.
Hey David, we are in Berthier-Masquinongé. This riding stretches from the suburbs of Montreal along the St. Lawrence River to Trois-Rivières. The NDP's candidate here is Ruth Ellen Brosseau. She was famous for being part of Jack Layton's Orange Wave in Quebec in 2011. That's when the New Democrats swept 59 seats in this province to become the official opposition. Brosseau was elected at 27 years old, having not stepped foot in the riding she represented and not speaking French. She now lives here on a farm. She has tried unsuccessfully to win this riding back in the last 2 elections from the Bloc Québécois. Now, the NDP only have 1 seat in this province. Polling continues to suggest the party may struggle to hold onto the ridings it went into this election with. But the New Democrats feel the Bloc's slumping support could pave a path to winning this seat in Quebec. David?
Thank you, Marina. That was the CBC's Marina von Stackelberg with the NDP. So that's what the parties have been doing on the day after the debates. We're going to check in with our party insiders on their take on the days that are left in this campaign as this election enters its endgame. Jordan, let's start with you. Berthier-Masquinongé, you know, with the MP from Vegas making a comeback potentially there.
She's great. Yeah, she's great. I love her. I think she's one of the best stories that we've had on the Hill for a long time. I mean, she's somebody who is a bartender, a single mom, and she, her election was absolutely not expected, but she put in the work, and she's really built a ton of ties in that community. She worked very hard to take senior roles within the NDP. And last election, she ran again, and she only lost by 1,000 votes. So if the vote splits break in her favor, it is very possible that Ruth Ellen will be back in Ottawa, and I think a lot of people would be pretty happy to see that.
So in the end game phase that we're moving into now in this election, what they say and where they go are kind of linked together for the leaders. So I know he's trying to, Jagmeet Singh wants to grow in Quebec, but he's in British Columbia tonight, right? I mean, what do you expect to see from the NDP leader in the days that are left?
Yeah, I certainly expect to see him spending a lot of time in British Columbia, particularly in the Lower Mainland and on Vancouver Island. We see him in Ontario, likely Northern Ontario and Southwestern Ontario. And he is really going to be driving home the exact case that he made during the debate, which is don't give the Liberals a blank check. You want to make sure that there are New Democrats there to hold them to account, to make sure that they're delivering on the help that people need. And really focusing down in on that. Now, it's also going to be platform week, I think, for all the parties. So that will be another opportunity to use those documents to kind of illustrate those values. This is not, I don't think, a big ideas campaign. This is a campaign where people are really looking at questions of values and leadership. So I would look for the platforms to really be vehicles for those things rather than super detailed, lengthy documents. Although, of course, Mr. Carney does have a lot of love for policy. He may surprise us with that tomorrow.
Yeah, it's good they all waited until after the debates for their costed, detailed election platforms. That's quite a great move by all the leaders. Fred, what do you think Pierre Poilievre is going to be? Where is he going to be, and what's he going to be saying, do you think, over the next 10 days?
I think he's going to be going to those core ridings, the 905 around GTA. Northern Ontario is still important, and then there's Lower Mainland and BC. Those are the main areas that's the path to a majority government.
Offense or defense, do you think?
He needs to go on offense. It needs to be offense. At the same time, the base is fired up. Like he's got the support there. He just needs to drive that home and really just hammer that message that this needs to be a time for change. And I think that's what he needs to be able to do. Again, I would think he needs to tie it to Trump. The problem is the Liberals aren't even talking about Trump anymore. They've abandoned their own ballot question. So it's shifting potentially onto Poilievre's ground now, where he could really, really pound away on this. And I can tell you, the last 3 elections in the last week, there's been volatile movement from NDP to Liberals. And right now, the NDP are at such a low number, it is possible that if the Conservatives hit the right tone, and if the NDP do their job, it's possible that you can drive that Liberal to NDP for the first time back, which could allow the Conservatives to come up and win this thing.
So Greg, it's interesting as Carney goes into the last 10 days of this, I've been hearing from Liberals today that you're going to see a massive advertising spend in the final days of this. $7, $8, $9, $10 million. You know, just aggressively hockey playoffs, all this sort of stuff, trying to make the closing argument. What do you think is going to happen, you know, on the ground, and where's Mark Carney going to be?
So on the ground, you see where he is today, Niagara Falls. He's going to be in southwestern Ontario this weekend. So all of these are indications of where there are seats in play that haven't been in play for Liberals for a long time. And in the Liberal case, this is trying to add, as opposed to, for the opposition parties, in a lot of cases, it's about save the furniture. So where he goes, that means that they think that that is a seat that they're going to be able to pick up. To Fred's point about Trump, you know, the Liberals might not have been talking about Trump, but Trump was talking about us. And Canadians can't miss that. So I'm not sure if that's a factor. And then tomorrow, you know, this is a distinction with a difference, but I think you might hear more about a plan as opposed to a platform. And I know that, you know, that's a kind of subtle, but this is about what I will do as Prime Minister. Karina hit the points there. You've got the NDP.
Is it going to have the word catalyze in it? I think it's going to have the word catalyze in both official languages. Do you think?
I think it's a requirement.
If it doesn't, it means he didn't write it.
Catalyzing Kearney? Is that the nickname?
A lot of syllables.
Yeah.
But the NDP are going to say it's about cutbacks, and the Conservatives are going to say it's about spending, again, stuck in the middle. The other thing I would just note is there's a Conservative ad that I believe dropped yesterday, and it's two older gentlemen, I'm assuming of retirement age. They're both golfing, and they're talking about considering Carney and that they're not going to vote, they're going to vote Conservatives. That is a very odd ad to put out at the time of advanced polling. It is narrowcasting to the extreme. These are individuals, this is a demographic that Pierre Poilievre and the Conservative Party should have sewed up, senior men. So if at this point, this is where your new ad, and there's no Pierre Poilievre in that ad, and if this is what you're putting out this weekend, I think that is a strong indication of the Conservative fortunes.
So this is you and Fred on the links. Fred, are they trying to win? I'm joking. Are they trying to win back older men there, or increase margins with older men?
We don't have.
Look at
look, if you look at the demographics, the older people are voting Liberal. It's not about. I'm not sure what that meant. Like, it's about trying to win back in terms of this election. Have older Canadians, senior Canadians, have not voted Conservative for the last 3 elections. We've lost that demographic, and it's getting worse for us. So,
but men tend to vote.
We lose the senior demographic. The last 3 elections, there needs to be something thought out there on how we do it. But the Liberals have done very well on that. So.
Yeah, it sort of goes against conventional thinking that in this election, younger voters are probably going to vote more Conservative than their parents,
flipped.
right?
Yeah, the whole table is flipped.
So, Jordan, on that,
that comes with some challenges.
Go ahead, Jordan.
I was just say, it comes with some challenges, of course, because even if Poilievre is winning those younger male demographics by huge margins, they're also the trickiest demographic to turn out to vote. And that was a dynamic that was also at play in the Ontario election. So we have sort of some recent evidence on this. And I expect that what the Conservatives are trying to do there is to improve their numbers in some of the most reliable demographics for turnout.
Okay. We're going to leave it there and let Fred go vote. You know, we had to interrupt democracy to let him come in and do a bit of television. And Jordan, thank you for joining us on a holiday Friday as you're off spending time with your family. Jordan Likeness, Greg McEachern, and Fred Delory. They are done for the day, but there's still lots more to come here on Power and Politics. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is just one of 91 candidates running in his Ottawa area riding. We'll tell you about the movement behind the longest ballot in Canadian history. And we're going to recap the key moments from week 4 of the campaign trail with our weekly wrap panel. Voters across the country lined up for the first day of advance polls, making this the first day of large-scale voting in this election. In some cases, people stood in long lines for more than an hour, waiting for their chance to vote for who they think should lead this country. But in one Ottawa suburban riding, voting could take longer due to the size of the ballots. Here's the lay of the land in Canada's capital, where Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre and Liberal leader Mark Carney's ridings share a border. Poilievre is running in the riding of Carleton, where he has been the MP for the area since 2004. And this time, Poilievre will be facing more opponents than ever because there are 91 confirmed candidates, and it's 91 in his riding. This is largely due to protesters running to bring attention to their call for electoral reform. One of those candidates is Mark Mutter, and he joins me now in the studio. Mark Mutter, it's good to meet you. Thanks for coming in today.
It's a pleasure.
This is not your first time on a ballot, or even the longest ballot. You were one of the candidates in LaSalle-Verdun. Tell me why you want to do this the first time and why you're up for it a second time. What are you trying to do here?
When I turned 18, it was my first time voting, and at the same time, it was the by-election season in LaSalle-Verdun last year. Mm-hmm. And for the longest time, I've been following elections on election night, seeing what's going on, and I've personally been noticing how there's an unfair amount of votes being attributed to each candidate. I mean, you oftentimes have minority governments which gain a lot fewer votes which gain a lot of votes but gain a lot less seats in Parliament afterwards than they actually deserve. You're seeing a lot of vote splitting. You're seeing a lot of candidates that deserve to be represented, but even though they actually have votes, they have zero representation in Parliament, and I think that should be changed.
So you want proportional representation or ranked ballot? What is your preferred system here?
The longest ballot is a citizens' initiative. There's a lot of different people viewing this in different ways. A lot of people believe in representative democracy. A lot of others believe in ranked choice voting. I personally prefer ranked choice voting, as I believe that's the fairest way of doing it, but either way, we're all united against first past the post.
Okay, so you had just turned 18 when you ran, so you're 18 years old, and
19.
You're 19, and this is your second time running
Correct.
in a federal election. Okay, here's what I need to ask you about, though. The ballot, all right? You call it the longest ballot. We do arts and crafts here at Power and Politics. This is a replica of what people in the riding of Carleton are going to get, right, when they go in on Election Day. And you can see the challenges that is going to create for filling out, and this has been a nightmare for the staff who have to count this stuff, and they're going extra late. This is a pretty big riding with Pierre Poilievre running there. You worried about backlash from this? I mean, the results for the leader of the Conservative Party may not be known to 2, 3 in the morning, and I think people might be frustrated with this.
It's not the first time we're getting this concern raised with us. Last time we were riding in Verdun, we had the same questions asked. Mm-hmm. We had the same people complaining and wondering if this is going to prevent proper elections from happening. And from what I've seen firsthand, being there until 2 a.m., close to 2 a.m. last year, in the polling station, seeing it get counted, it was not as big of an issue as people believe it to be. As a matter of fact,
2 a.m. is really late to get results in a riding, right? Like
correct.
It normally happens at a pretty crisp way that you're able to get a critical mass to make a projection. That is late. You may not think it's difficult, but for those people who've worked long days, it is, right?
Certainly, but it did start a conversation for a lot of them. You have people who are voting there for the whole day. They're seeing a long ballot, and they don't know what's going on. And actually talking to them about it, talking to them about why this is happening and why I believe this should be changed, and how there's a whole group of citizens who are coming together to actually get this conversation started on a national level is amazing. And a lot of people actually supported the group when this was talked about.
Right, but do you think it's built a national conversation for electoral reform? I mean, there are you look at cost of living, you look at Donald Trump, you look at inflation, you look at sovereignty and security and all of these things, like those core issues, and I'm not saying the state of democracy isn't important, but they overshadow everything else, right? So do you think, what you guys did in St. Paul's and in LaSalle has actually resonated beyond just those little moments?
Well, this happening right now is proof that this is starting a conversation. And I firmly believe that in order to have a country that's able to fight on the world stage, we need to have a proper democracy that actually represents what the people want. We currently have a lot of times in the history of this country in which we've had governments that don't truly represent what people voted for. And I believe to actually stand up on the world stage, to actually have a strong country in the future, we need to properly represent everybody's votes.
Why did you pick Carleton this time? What is it? Is this targeting Pierre Poilievre for a specific reason, or was it just time for a Conservative to be nailed because you did it in Liberal ridings last time?
Over the last few times of us running this, we've been accused of only running this in Liberal ridings. So this time we figured we're going to do this in Mark Carney's riding and in Pierre Poilievre's riding. But purely logistically, organizing the whole thing is really difficult. You need to gather 150 signatures per candidate in each riding, and that is very difficult to do. We were about to actually do this in Nepean and this time in Pierre Poilievre's riding. However, we just couldn't get the amount of signatures required to do this in Mark Carney's riding. So we figured might as well finish this off right now, just in one of the ridings, and do it properly.
Okay, so why do you think that was, right? Because, Pierre Poilievre has represented Carleton since 2004. Like, that is not an insignificant amount of time. He's seen as having a very strong base of support out there. How did you get 150 signatures times, what, 85 candidates or 86 candidates that you're running? Yeah, because to bring it all the way up to 91, because the Greens are running, the NDP, the Conservatives and Liberals. I mean, how were you able to convince voters in the leader of the Conservative Party's riding to sign those signatures, sign up?
People are surprisingly sympathetic towards the cause. Even last year in Montreal when we were doing this, I was out there gathering signatures, and people are curious about this. People are really used to the status quo. A lot of, especially younger people, are tired of the same thing happening over and over again. A lot of people from my generation are used to growing up for their whole lives, seeing this unfair system of first past the post being used in all the elections, and a lot of people truly want change to happen. So it's not difficult to get somebody to just sign a paper and to hope for the best afterwards, since I believe it truly represents what people want.
So why didn't it work in Nepean, in Mark Carney's riding? Do they not care about electoral reform and representation?
That is not
or
the case.
like, what happened there?
No, it's actually just gathering the signatures. I mean, we had to stand there for multiple hours in each of the ridings, and I believe it was rainy on one of the days, so we just couldn't get the amount of papers out of the way properly. So it was purely logistical.
So what do you say to people who look at this and say, this is a stunt, and they're annoyed by it, and they think it's going to slow things down, and you've got an election that, for older people like me who, it's been a long time since I was 19 years old, who see this as maybe the most important election of their lifetime, and something like this is happening. What do you say to people who are going to be annoyed by this?
People are certainly allowed to view that way, and I sympathize with them. I mean, it's pretty simple to see how this complicates the election in a few ways. However, I really stand by my words that it is very important to properly change the way that our elections are held. If we really want our country to be strong, if we want our people to have confidence in our electoral system, if you want to have governments that truly represent what our people want, we need to have a system that's more equitable, that is more fair, and that better shows what people want in our country. And this is actually getting a lot of media attention. This is happening right now. We've been having a lot of attention back in Montreal, all across the country, of people tuning in and figuring out what the hell is going on, why are there long ballots? And people are learning about electoral reform in a way that they never would otherwise. You don't just approach people on the street and go, hey, have you ever heard of first past the post? We should change it. You don't just do that to people. You actually have to gain their attention.
Okay, so on this ballot, you are...
It'd be the second column.
Yeah, I'm. There you are. You're right here. In LaSalle-Verdun, you got 20 votes, I think, 0.1% of the vote, but that still put you in the top 10 just because of the way that thing went. I mean, do you want to do this for a career? Do you think you're going to go into politics? I mean, you're a young man. You've got a lot of options ahead of you. But, do you think this is something you want to do, or is this just a cause for you at this point in your life?
It is purely a cause for me. I'm studying in civil engineering, completely unrelated to politics in any way. But it is a field that's still related to the way our government is run. You're seeing a lot of infrastructure built, and you have to follow along with how ministries work, and seeing how it's all still fundamentally related to the way people vote. I just want it to change. I just want the status quo to finally be gone, and for young people and people of all ages, as a matter of fact, to stand up for what they believe in and to have a fair democracy.
All right. Well, Mark, my dad is a civil engineer. He had a pretty good career out of it, so good luck in your studies. That's Mark Mutter, running in Carleton as part of the Longest Ballot Initiative. Thank you, sir. Good to meet you.
Thank you.
All right, we've made it through the debates, and advance voting is underway with only 10 days to go until Election Day. We're going to recap the key moments from Week 4 on the campaign trail with our weekly wrap next. Want to catch up with Power in Politics while you're on the go? Then check out and follow our daily podcast. I'm David Cochrane. The Power in Politics podcast starts now, where I speak to the key players in the political stories that everyone is talking about. You can find the latest episode on the CBC Listen app or wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm asking for your support in this election so that I can continue to fight to defend the things that make Canada, Canada, the things that we hold dear.
We will build the strongest economy. We will build Canada strong. I'm asking for your support, the honor of doing so.
Let's have a voice chosen by and for Quebecers, an ally for Canadians as equals in front of Mr. Trump.
We can restore the Canadian promise so that hard work gets you a beautiful house on a safe street under a proud flag.
The leaders' debates have come and gone, and advanced voting has begun. But this week, there was a battle for coverage between what was happening on the debate stage and what was happening on the sidelines. On stage, the party leaders focused their attacks on Liberal leader Mark Carney, while some big last-minute changes by the Debates Commission threatened to overshadow the substance of those debates. Plus, the Conservative rift deepened as Ontario's Premier criticized the federal campaign. So what does all of this mean as early bird voters head to advance polls? Where our weekly wrap panel is back to break down the biggest moments. Joining me now, Michael Solberg. He is, of course, a former staffer in the Stephen Harper government. Zane Velji is a former strategist for the Alberta NDP. And here with me in the studio, Laura D'Angelo, who was an advisor to former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. It is good to see you all, gang. All right, we're going to start with the debates. So leaders, they all made swipes at Mark Carney last night while he played a bit of defense. Here's just one of those exchanges last night. Have a listen.
It may be difficult, Mr. Poilievre. You spent years running against Justin Trudeau on the carbon tax, and they're both gone. Okay, they're both gone. And we're in a new
impersonation of him with the same policies tonight.
Very different. Look, I'm a very different person from Justin Trudeau.
Okay, so Laura, what did you take away from what we saw on the debate stage last night?
I mean, I think the reality is there was something for everyone who was looking for it, right? Like, if you had a guy on that stage, if you had a horse, there was something for everyone there. But one of the things that I thought was really impressive and really interesting was watching Mark Carney during that debate. Even when he was getting attacked, for the most part, he kept pivoting back to policy, which we know he loves, we know he's wonky. It was almost, boring, right? 1, 2, 3. He kept pivoting to this. And
he likes to punctuate with numbers,
he really likes
yes.
to punctuate with numbers. Yeah. And it came across as actually very prime ministerial, right? It came across as he was above the fray. And honestly, I found it quite almost like he was bemused by everybody else on the stage. Like he couldn't quite believe that this was what was happening. And I thought it was great, with the exception of a couple champ eye rolls, which as a former champion eye roller, sorry, mom and dad, I can say, I thought it was great. I thought that the format of the debate, I appreciated, and I think that if you went into that debate thinking Mark Carney's the guy, you probably left thinking Mark Carney's the guy.
Interesting. Michael, it's interesting the way the debate itself, the 2 hours of the leaders with the single moderator, the format very different, not this rotating cast of characters and not all this one moderator. The leaders, it was a debate, not a TV show, right? What did you make of what we saw?
I don't know. I don't know if I characterize it as that, David. In fact, my critique is levied at the debate commission and just, perhaps the unfortunate reality of how the polls have shaped out, because I just wanted to see Mark Carney and Pierre Poilievre on the debate stage together. They're the only two leaders here who have any serious chance of forming government, any realistic chance at all of forming government. So I would have preferred to see a lot more action from them. And I found it, in fact, I found it detrimental. I thought Jagmeet Singh in particular was such an annoyance. And really,
I am shocked you feel that way about the NDP leader, Michael. I cannot believe a former Stephen Harper staffer and Alberta Conservative said such things.
but I get it. I know I'm a homer, but I say it seriously. I thought it was a distraction from the real outcomes that are possible here. And I really just wanted to see those two go toe to toe. And I thought Jagmeet Singh was a complete annoyance, frankly, to the behest of his own party. I did not understand his debate strategy. I wish he wasn't there, but overall, productive function of democracy. But I wish we just saw those two leaders go head to head. And I know I'm not alone.
Zane, if any New Democrats are watching, they should rank Michael's likelihood to vote for them very, very, very low based on that soliloquy we just heard. What are your thoughts on the substance of the event last night?
Jagmeet Singh was a revelation. Why are we even having an election? Is where I stand.
There we go.
The reason Mike finds Jagmeet Singh annoying is because he ruined Pierre Poilievre's direct-to-camera clips that he wanted.
Again and again and again. Like he was waiting for it and then going, right?
Nailed it every single time. I think Jagmeet was quite effective, even if it was just being an annoyance, the Brad Marchand, one might say, of the debate, just annoying the direct-to-camera monologues that Pierre wanted to give clip and then try to go viral organically. I'll also add that on the two leaders head-to-head, I think Pierre Poilievre, something was revealed last night, which is the persona and the personality that we know of Pierre Poilievre is not the only effective Pierre Poilievre. Last night was a dialed-down version of the man that I thought was very good at debating, maybe even outright won the debate, and frankly was just as effective as the more prickly, assertive Pierre Poilievre that we've gotten to know over the last 2 years. Bad news for Pierre Poilievre, 10 days left on the clock. Good news for Mark Carney, 10 days left on the clock, and also good news for Mark Carney. While most of the attacks were leveled against him, I felt like he didn't actually really debate as much as chair a debate. He pretty much took cues in and saying, that's a good point. That makes no sense. That's interesting. Kind of like how he was chairing a board meeting, which was like, okay, 4 points. Point 1, I don't like that. Point 2, my own point. Point 3, this one doesn't make sense. Here's the solution. Let's move on. I thought that on paper, that seems like a really bad debate strategy. But in practice, I think Carney nailed it with that particular strategy. The only real strategy he has, his only experience is that sort of board level corporate governance. And here we are. That's maybe what Canadians are looking for. Like Mark Carney continues to be the luckiest man in the world with the perfect storm and now the perfect timing of the debate. Add a sideshow that's a distraction for it and a nothing burger in terms of an outcome with 10 days left on the clock. I mean, yeah, this guy's so lucky in so many ways. Talented, but lucky.
Michael, with that analysis, is Zayn now a more annoying New Democrat for you than Jagmeet Singh was? I mean, what do you make of that?
Zayn cannot possibly be more annoying than he already was.
That's the right answer.
Yes. Of course, I'm kidding. But no, I mean, I see where Zayn's coming from here. But the bottom line is that Jagmeet Singh was on that stage. What I had thought and what I had assumed to try and carve off support from Mark Carney, a political movement that is currently sending him to virtual extinction.
He's got some blue-orange fights, though, too, right? Like, he's got a smack in every direction is the problem, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure I agree with that. I think Mark Carney was the battle he needed to take, and instead he defended him time and time again, spent much of his time on Pierre Poilievre, which limited support he can carve off from the Conservatives. Instead, it's the Liberal movement that he really needs to worry about at his own peril, and he decided not to.
Just a quick question, Laura, on the different sort of Pierre Poilievre we saw at the end of the debate. And, I thought Poilievre had a good night last night. Yeah. He was, he did a little bit of the prosecutor stuff that we see at committee that, people in the Conservative movement love him for. But that very emotional bit at the end where he talked about, meeting people and serving the country and acknowledge the patriotism of everyone on the stage, which is not something we've seen Pierre Poilievre do. It comes late in the campaign, late in the career, but that's a different kind of guy. If Canada had seen that for the past 6-7 months, how do you think the Liberals would be feeling about this?
If we had been watching that Pierre Poilievre for the past 6 or 7 months, or even snippets of that Pierre Poilievre for the past 2 years, I think we would be having a very different election right now, especially when you pair that with some of the really impressive and interesting long-form, journalism that's come out recently, and the podcast interviews where he talks about his family and his daughter and being an older father. Like he is trying to humanize himself, certainly, and last night he did achieve that for sure. But to Zayn's point, and we've talked about it on this show a lot, that needs soak time, and I'm not sure that Canadians are going to buy seeing that guy for one night. And maybe clips of those podcasts, maybe if they're lucky, if that is going to have an impact in 10 days. Okay,
look, there's a lot of focus this week on decisions made by the Debates Commission. Moving the French debate, the time of it, because of the Canadians game, uninviting the Greens, the morning of that debate, and then there was the media accreditation challenges, we're going to call them. And so yesterday I spoke with the executive director of the Leaders Debate Commission. I asked him about Rebel News and being registered as a third-party campaign group in this election. Here's what Michelle Cormier had to say. Registering as a third party in an election campaign is an official step to become an actor in that election campaign that goes well beyond the world of journalism, right?
Well, I wasn't aware of that.
Would this have changed your thought process, I wonder?
Perhaps we had to analyze it. I just learned about this today.
Okay, Zane, Green Party leader Jonathan Pedno is calling for the commission to resign after all of this. The media scrums were canceled. I mean, what's your assessment of the choices that were made here? The debates themselves went well. Before and after, there were challenges.
Yeah, and listen, the right-wing media outlets, not journalists, media outlets, agitators got their way. They fundraise off of stuff like this. They fundraise off of controversy and the fact that, you know, the commission did not challenge their status this time around, despite having a court ruling last time, and Ezra Levant and Rebel having a TPA registered, or third party registered, kind of puts into question the integrity of the entire operation in some way that they should potentially consider. And in that interview that you did, you know, the executive director said, like, I would potentially consider that. The issue ultimately becomes trust, right? And the issue becomes one of democracy. I think where the commission performed well, and you've mentioned this, was its on-stage product. I know we can grapple with who should have been there, who shouldn't have, but I thought Steve Paikin on the English debate was fantastic. I thought the leaders were substantive. That's the most amount of time I've heard on energy policy in a very long time, in specific detail with the two main leaders, as an example, right? But I think where the commission may have potentially lost some of its credibility is a lack of political IQ. This is both a democratic product and a product that requires a political intelligence. And it can't just simply be a democratic product. It has to be one that screens for agitators, those with mis and disinformation agendas and narratives, all those sort of things, and have a political IQ that also meets the moment. And I hope that the commission, whether they resign or not, stays there, because I think without a commission, we enter a different world where we're going to have right-wing debates with Pierre Poilievre and Maxime Bernier or their equivalents on stage, and different sort of left-wing debates, and Canadians in an even more fractured way may not even be able to assess where leaders stand head-to-head, apples to apples, which I know was the suggestion that Mike made with the two leading folks on stage together.
Yeah, he wants a boxing match. I think he just wants those two. But, you know, you know, we were inside a perimeter where the Prime Minister, because, you know, Mark Carney is the Prime Minister, and Michael, like, the RCMP plays a big role in that. You know, our little set there out in the freezing flurries and cold of Montreal, they came in and hand searched the bags. Dogs came in and sniffed everything. You had that level of security. And by the end of the night, the Montreal police had to be called to come in and set up a perimeter to get certain people in and out of there. And security had to, like, sneak me and a colleague out of the facility. Like, it just went very much off the rails inside a venue that had been cleared for the presence of the Prime Minister of Canada. It can't happen like that, right?
No, of course not. Look, the debate commission has been set up for, I don't know, what small handful of years, and they're clearly demonstrating just how incapable and incompetent they are to throw what should be a fairly simple exercise. It's a fairly simple exercise in democratic action. And look, like Ezra Levant, he's no friend of mine. The guy hates my guts. But I'll give him this. You know, he was accredited through court injunctions. The court's made a ruling on that. But where there is a very fair critique is his role as a third-party advertiser, which I cannot believe, Dave, that you were the one to inform the head of the commission on live, on air. Like, what a complete blight on the whole exercise, on Michel himself, and just the entire thing. It's embarrassing. But what I will say is, someone and his people on this show to talk about what matter, go to the doors and tell me how many people have heard about or care about the Leadership Commission's debate drama. Nobody. In fact, I'm sure if you go to someone's door, the first thing they're going to say to you is, get off my lawn. The second thing they'll say to you is, I have no idea what you're talking about. So I'm not sure it matters in the grand scheme of things. I think we're probably living a bit under the dome. But the bottom line is, the exercise and what has occurred here still does matter. And it's embarrassing what the Leadership Commission put together, and they should resign, in my full-throated opinion.
Well, Laura, I mean, Michael's probably told to get off everybody's lawn, no matter whether it's an election or not. But it's just, what are your thoughts on how it all played out with the Greens and with the accreditation stuff?
I mean, it's embarrassing, right? Like, there actually isn't really another word for it. To not know there's one of the most important hockey games for the city of Montreal, where you are hosting two debates, going head-to-head with your debate, it's a pretty simple Google. To have almost a month to at least 2 weeks to make the decision on the Greens and not make that decision, to take the path of least resistance when it comes to rebel, right? Like, frankly, that was the path of least resistance. Your interview was really illuminating because it didn't seem like they got a lot of advice this time around. It was based on before. They didn't search third-party advertisers. They didn't do the basics. And then when you add in the safety concerns, there are teams of people who do this all the time, right? The Prime Minister travels all over the world all the time. It is actually not that hard to secure these perimeters, both from a technical perspective and an RCMP safety perspective, but also a political perspective. You have national campaigns running right now across the country, and they are doing a pretty good job of making sure that this type of thing doesn't happen. And on the one official night it does, it's pretty embarrassing.
Yeah, and look, there's ways you can control it once people are inside. That's not about limiting free speech. They have two lines. There's an English line and a French line, so you're controlling for language. You can say one question per media, no matter how many divisions you have. And, you know, one question, I know. There's ways you can do it to increase the participation without censoring and silencing people. But, you know, the pool needed a lifeguard, and I'm not sure it was there. Okay, a quick break, but the Conservative Party needs to shore up more support in the key battleground of Ontario to secure a path to victory in this election. We're going to talk about that and the final days of the campaign with our weekly wrap panel next. Okay, we are back with our weekly wrap panel. Michael Solberg, Zane Velji, and Laura D'Angelo. All right, advanced polling is open now, and Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre's path to victory really relies on the 122 seats up for grabs in Ontario. But he faced a hit in that province when Doug Ford defended his former campaign manager's criticisms of the Poilievre campaign. Take a listen to this.
He's tough as nails, but he's the best campaign manager in the country. And to be very frank, if Corey was running that campaign, I don't think Mr. Poilievre would be in the position he's in right now. But it's still a lot of time left. And we still have debates. At the end of the day, the people will decide which way they want this country to move forward. But sometimes the truth hurts.
Okay, Michael, the truth hurts. Does this hurt? Corey tonight has kind of unleashed a wave of conservative on conservative crime in Ontario and on social media. What do you make of this inter-party violence?
I don't know. I mean, obviously, it's not helpful to have the conservative movement in this country fractured. Certainly not if they're airing their dirty laundry and kind of open critique publicly. So no question, I don't think it's helpful. But I also kind of chalk it up to just being broadly noise. And look, I like Corey. I've known Corey a long time. I've known him for 15 years. He's a professional acquaintance, if not a friend. And I respect the guy. But I also hesitate on the advice because he's long been asking to pivot to Trump, which is an obvious response to the campaign. But a lot of polling has indicated that the Trump question is in free fall in terms of his ballot box kind of significance. Most Canadians now want to talk about affordability, the cost of living, things that will outlive Trump, things that existed before Trump. And frankly, on the Trump question, the Liberals also lead per most polling by like 40 or 50 points.
Yeah,
I'm not sure I want to pivot to an area where the Liberals command such a significant lead. So I don't think his advice is great. I don't think it was great that he aired it publicly. Do I think it will matter significantly? No, I don't. I think it's just noise at the end of the day.
So Zane, are Trump and affordability kind of converging in some way because the economic anxiety you feel over the possibility of what he could do to the economy? And I wonder just a fracture in sort of the leadership of the two levels of the party, whether that can have just in some marginal ridings. Maybe you don't cooperate. Maybe you don't make people available. Does it cost you something in some key seats?
Sure. It absolutely can. And I think Mike's analysis is actually quite good around pivoting to the Trump question, a ballot box one that you're not leading on, despite the convergence that I think I agree with David. But at the end of the day, listen, this is Doug Ford now jumping in vote-rich, seat-rich Ontario, sending a 30-second, very clippable, very soundbitey message with the punchline at the end that sometimes the truth hurts, which, come on, like that is designed to do something. Don't tell me that's not designed to do nothing. Yes, it's loyalty to Corey tonight, the guy that got you there 3 times. Sure, right? Like we all wish for that sort of loyalty in politics, but it's also designed to do something, and it's designed to do something in the area that Premier Doug Ford just won a third straight mandate with a number of seats that anyone, regardless of jersey color, politically would envy for a mandate like that on the third go. So, yeah, it's designed to do something, and it may as well just hold those poll numbers down for Poilievre in Ontario, even just a bit, even just in a couple of seats. But this is just the beginning of something. I don't think the end is something. This will go a couple of seasons, whatever this is, whatever this show is within the conservative movement.
Yeah, Laura, it's interesting, to see sort of the social media ecosystem of conservatism, like just attacking Doug Ford as a closet liberal, and he's basically endorsing Kearney. And I don't know if he's a closet liberal, but he is throwing a lot of help the way of your leader, it seems, throughout this election.
Yeah, I don't know if he's a closet liberal, but I mean, listen, whether it's this comment, which to Zane's point, I think is intentional, right? It's a pretty excellent and clippable backhanded insult right there. But he also took a photo with Mark Carney right at the beginning, right before the writ dropped. I can't remember the exact quote, but something about, that's a really smart guy. He also...
knows finance better than anyone.
Exactly,
something like that.
Something like that. He also said that he wasn't going to, that the progressive conservatives would not be participating in this election. They wouldn't be out helping. So, I agree with Michael to an extent that I'm not sure this is going to have a huge impact. But I also agree with Zane that I think this is going to have a small impact. And right now in Ontario, the Conservatives can't have a small negative impact, right? The reality is that this election will likely, whether it's a minority or a majority, is largely going to be determined in Ontario. And so they actually can't have them split the wrong way.
Yeah, and you do see people like Nick Kouvalis, who does the polling there, sort of just laying it all out and giving credence that there is division. There is, tension and fights going on there. Yeah. So who knows, where that goes. But, Michael, we're moving into the end game now, right? Cost of platforms and closing arguments and hit the key targeted ridings between now and April 28th. What are you watching for over the next week or so in this campaign?
Getting out the vote. It's about taking what you've already identified as your accessible vote and ensuring that they get to the polls. I think every leader here has done their best here to bake in as much support as humanly possible. The debates were kind of the last significant, very public effort in being able to do that. Sure, you can run some ads and things like that and still host a couple of other rallies and key target ridings, but that's in the same direction of what I'm saying. It's about getting your vote mobilized, excited to go out and cast that vote for you, because it's one thing to tell a pollster, I think I'd support Mark Carney or otherwise. It's a very another thing to actually get them to put on their pants and get out the door and cast that ballot. And that's core to every campaign, but especially one that is this important, promises a very high voter turnout, and where the stakes are this high. And watch for the Conservatives, frankly, and have a very significant, I think, advantage on that is the one with kind of the longest runway, at least in terms of leadership, and having that planned out.
Zane, what are you watching for the stretch run here in this closing argument phase?
Yeah, I think the closing arguments are going to happen as they do. I also think this is the time when in a campaign script we see the oppo. The oppo that never got vetted by journalists, that couldn't actually make it to the screen through a media outlet. You'll see political parties directly dump some of that. You may even have some journalistic outlets who race to work on something in the public interest to get it out there. So this could be oppo week. I'm always skeptical of the soak time, as I call it, for people to absorb it and fundamentally change their direction on it. But I would not be surprised at all if there's 3 or 4 things about the front runner in this campaign that try to come out over the course of this next week, both in terms of desperation, but also in terms of informing the public around a guy that many people certainly seem to like, but don't really know well just yet. So for me, what I'm looking for, it's oppo week, despite the fact that it's the last week.
Laura, I think it's going to be ad week for your crowd. I'm hearing there's like $8 or $9 million ready to go on a big, especially hockey playoff and everywhere sort of ad campaign. What are you watching for the last stretch?
I'm watching for ads. I think that I have also heard similar things, but I don't think that they will be alone in that. I think this is going to be just ad week across the board. I also think this is going to be social media ad week. I think everybody's feeds on every platform are going to be flooded. It's something we didn't talk about with the debates, right? For the many, many millions of Canadians who didn't watch them, it's what moments get clipped.
Those clips,
and, what goes viral and what the parties can push. So I am really, fortunately or unfortunately, watching social media for ads.
$8 million is a massive share of the spending limit, though.
Huge buck.
Like, it's about $40 million bucks. Is that in round numbers?
Just
right around. Like that's a 50-year budget, like on ads in the final week. Like that's a. What's the thinking there to hold back that much money to have it ready to go at this stage?
I mean, there's been so much talk that the Liberal vote is soft, right? And so, in this last GOTV push, you have to do 2 things. One, to Michael's point, you have to do the ground game. You have to be knocking doors, driving people to the polls.
Even when they say, get off my lawn.
Even when Michael yells at them to get off his lawn. You have to do those things. But the other part of this is that, to Zane's point, Canadians don't know Mark Carney that well. And so there has to be a huge push on Mark Carney's brand, what the ballot question is, and why he's different than the Liberals before. And I think that is a very calculated play this time around. We've also spent a lot of time on this show talking about paid versus earned media, and that this campaign has largely been about paid media. I think the Liberals saved the best for last, and they're ready to make that big push.
Yeah, Michael, in the 30 seconds we've got left, Carney has an advantage as Prime Minister in the moment to get the earned media, right? Because he can go to Ottawa, go to the podium, and deal with Trump. And now if they're breaking the piggy bank open in the final week, they're going to get a pretty good push there. Your quick thoughts?
Yeah, sure, but the Conservatives have the massive fundraising advantage over the Liberals and have for how many quarters? So, yeah, you'll see some Liberal ads, but watch for a final push from Pierre Poilievre as well. Stakes are much higher for him, in branding and sharing those humanizing moments that we spoke about in the segment. in the campaign that I also wish he had been doing since at least January. So, watch for some of the boosts from the clips of the debate to be pushed out in the final hours of trying to court the last-minute votes.
Okay, we're going to end it there for the television program. The four of us, we're going to continue this conversation on the Power and Politics podcast feed. You can find our weekly wrap episode tomorrow morning and every Saturday throughout the campaign. Laura, Zane, and Michael, thank you. They'll be back in just a little bit. I'll see you on Monday. Ian Hannah-Mansing's show is up next with Hannah Mansing Tonight.